You want to call Senator Ludlam?
I do, thanks, Chair.
I suspect we may come back to this issue later in the evening. I just want to turn to some of the other issues that you mentioned in your opening statement, but also come to the issue of contractors and subcontractors, because it's one of the things that was also blamed when the company suffered pretty significant delays that were announced between last December and, I don't know, whenever we were last in Sydney in March or April. You mentioned a number of 3,650 contractors that have done safety training. Is that the total complement of subcontractors working through various companies for NBN Co?
I can't give you the exact number, but our aim is to put every single contractor and subcontractor who works on the NBN through those courses. So I think it would be very close to that number. There could be some obviously every day by day it changes, Senator, but that would be roughly the number.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. How many of those are on 457 visas? Do you have any visibility of that?
457 visas? I don't know. No. I don't know. I have to take that one on notice.
Are you likely to be able to find out, or is it likely that you will? I guess I can't ask you to judge the likeliness, but whether your top tier contractors would have that information, and if they did, whether they would pass that on to NBN Co?
I would have to take that on notice. I do know that there have been some specialised skills that have come in from overseas.
Yeah.
For example, ribbon splicing would be an area.
Yep. I could understand why that was the case, because I don't imagine there's a very big jobs market for that in Australia until you turned up.
Yes.
I think we were the first to deploy ribbon fibre. So.
Yep. But I'm also interested to know, I mean, there's a lot of skilled labour involved here. There's also a lot of semi-skilled labour. Whether across what categories you'd be able to identify the proportion of your workforce that's on these visas.
I don't have that.
No, I don't yet have it at the table, I understand.
Take it on notice if we can.
Thanks, Mr Quigley. If you could just step us through some of the issues that you worked through in your opening presentation. Slide 4, the take-up rate by FSAM. Am I reading it right, and that graph of averages below that would tend to indicate that the uptake in the trial sites has actually been quite a bit slower than when you did the volume rollout?
That's the case. They're the 3 Tasmanian sites.
Yeah. What do you put that down to?
Well, I mean, I think we started in the toughest state and in the toughest regions in the toughest state. It was one of the reasons we started there. I mean, the Tasmanian government wanted to, going right back to the very beginning, the Tasmanian government wanted to put their hand up to be part of it from the beginning.
Yeah. But
we chose some of the toughest spots. And back when we started, Tasmania, back in 07, 08, Tasmania only had 1/3 of the state using broadband. In other words, 2/3 potentially, if they wanted to get on the internet, used dial-up.
Yeah.
So when we started, it was the toughest. And back in 2009, 2010, the debate that we're having today about broadband was very much in its infancy. And so the public knowledge, understanding of what the NBN could bring was probably, I think it's fair to say, a lot lower than it is today. We've had 4 years of fairly heated public debate, and as you can see from the figures, as we open new areas, the knowledge and understanding of what the NBN can bring to Australians, businesses, homes, etc., is showing an ever-increasing demand.
Okay. I guess that seems reasonable. The first release site graph is also much shallower. The volume rollout is obviously trending at 45 degrees, so that's, if I'm reading it right, that's a sign that the take-up's been much more rapid.
That's correct.
What's the explanation for the kink in the volume rollout in the averages between weeks 21 and 31? We actually go into reverse.
That's just simply an artefact of the averaging. Just the way what we've done, if you look at all the graph above, you look at all the red lines, all we've done is week by week we've averaged each of those take-up rates for each of those lines. So it's just an artefact of how the take-up rate went.
And it's when we released at one point a number of sites which obviously had 0% take-up rate day one, and hence you saw this little dip when we released a significant number.
If I can just add to my answer from earlier, Senator Ludlam, I mean, the sort of examples that I'm about to read didn't exist back when we started the Tasmania Rollout site. So this is Dave Larhoven. He runs a small media and marketing business from home on NBN Fibre in Coffs Harbour. And he said this week in the the Coffs Coast Advocate, I'd say the NBN has improved my work efficiency and productivity for my business between 100 and 200%.
Now, I think we're using estimates for advertising.
A lot of the time, no.
Hold on.
You asked the question about why was it low at the beginning, and it's very high now, and I'm giving you a reason why. A lot of the time I save through the NBN comes with far better speeds in downloading and uploading. I have to video conference a lot in my line of work, so there is no fracturing when I use Skype.
Right.
Because
I guess I
can
have
contact
walked
my
right
customers.
into this one.
No, I'm happy to stop there to allow you to keep questioning, but that sort of example didn't exist when we started in Tasmania, in Scottsdale and Smithton and Midway Point.
Okay. So the increasing, Mr Quigley, would you expect to see that curve increase in steepness as you continue into the volume rollout? Or is this about as fast as you reckon the uptake's likely to get?
This is very rapid uptake
So
compared to previous technologies, ADSL or HFC or even dial-up, and compared to take-up rates that other service providers see around the world, other telcos see. This is a very rapid rate now with those new sites. So I would be frankly astonished if it went even faster than this. This is really quite spectacular take-up rates.
Okay. Back last time...
I will come back later to talk about a little bit more about that, Senator Ludlam.
Some more
but I will
personal
let you keep going.
testimonials. Thanks. When the joint NBN committee convened in Sydney 6 or 8 weeks ago, it was right off the heels of a rather abrupt announcement that you figured you'd be 6 months behind schedule by 2022 or whenever the build is likely to be complete.
No.
Or you were 6 months behind schedule as of now, you'd be on time and on time.
No, we're 3 months behind.
3 months,
as we said.
okay.
Yep.
Do you consider that is still accurate? That
Yes.
it still prevails? Okay. On slide 2 and 3, those curves and those estimates that you provided for us, you provided the joint committee last time the first accurate or reasonably accurate across a large sample size estimates of cost for the different cohorts. You haven't reproduced those.
We haven't
slides.
reproduced those. We haven't had. There's no additional substantial information that would change those. So
okay.
that's why we didn't include them, Senator.
You didn't include my favourite, which is the user profile being upside down compared to what was in your business plan. Anything to report? And are you...
No, other than it's variable. Remember, our long-term plan was the user profile we expected to shift more to the lower end where we had been predicting. I think we're seeing that as we see more and more people take up and you see people move across from the copper, it will shift down, and we are seeing it shift down.
Okay.
It's still nowhere near to where we're projecting it to be long term, so it's still a bit upside down, but not as upside down as it was before.
All right. Okay, that's good. And I'll ask you, as I think I probably have 4 or 5 times now, you're going to end up having to recalculate your business case or the return to the taxpayer if those rates of uptake of the different user profiles prevail. It's a good story, but
it's a good story. It's still, we're very early days, and we will stick with, I think, the numbers that we...
Engineers, okay.
Have, yep.
One of the things that had caused fairly significant delays that we spoke of at that hearing in Sydney was fibre splicing that needed to be basically torn out of the ground and redone. I'm probably using slightly lazy language here, but up to 30% in some areas were found to be defective and replaced.
Yeah, that wasn't average. I think that wasn't a number that NBN Co talked about. That was a number that I think somebody else had reported that they had heard from someone in the field. Now, we didn't contradict it because it is possible in some location, if someone wasn't trained properly, you may get a rework of that rate. That's not what we would expect to see long term, and it's not what we're seeing long term. I don't know if Mr. Steffens wants to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, we do not see that failure rate on average at all. And in general, and I've been in the field only last week, and spoke to an experienced splicer who the failure rate is in the very, very low single digits. And that's what you would expect for an experienced splicer. And if somebody is fresh on the job, you expect a higher fault rate. But overall, we're expecting still and seeing fault rates in in single digits.
So that 30% that was quoted, I think it might have been quoted for one instance in one place.
Maybe.
We know of no...
I don't have a citation for
one
you,
team,
it's just the number.
my understanding is one team in one specific area that was doing one specific area was having that sort of difficulty, but as Mr. Sefton has said, that's not an average or even representative.
No. And we wouldn't, I mean, we're obviously not going to tolerate that. We're getting better and better views on those types of measures, we would move in very rapidly if that would happen.
Okay, so do you feel, not that you haven't reported anything on that issue on paper this time around, but do you feel as though the fault rate for those installations has fallen back to the industry average or to something that you feel happy to tolerate?
I mean, in general, I would say yes, but since we are still adding a lot of additional resource onto the project, we are training a lot of splicers, that the inexperienced will have initially a higher fault rate or produce a higher fault rate, but we consistently see this fault rate coming down as they gain more experience. And, we obviously provide work opportunities for years to come for these people. So therefore, the initial learning curve people are on, we're quite comfortable with.
All right, I'll leave it there. I might come back later if there's time. Thanks all. Wish you well. I got to see the NBN truck at Seabit the other day for the first time, and it's great. Bring it to WA.
Yeah, I agree.
When can we get it? You've had it in Tasmania a fair bit. So
Yes.
it's certainly the same.
We haven't had it in WA that much, and the people working on it clearly love their jobs. That looks